Before we get started with this completely unhinged rant, look at this. This is fan art from @CaseyMcCole and @RedSpigot on Instagram. They look sick as hell, and I wish I could draw like them. So, if you want to send me fan art, consider checking out my Instagram @StorytimeWithJeff or the Discord server, which has a dedicated art channel. Both are linked in the bio. With that, on to the video. This is the story of my summer, also known as the most stressful and utterly meaningless 4 months of my life. So far. But I wasn't just sitting on the couch watching horror movies on Netflix. Oh no, I spent those 4 months relearning the entirety of single and multivariable calculus from scratch for a university placement test. This in itself shouldn't have happened, but my university wouldn't accept any of my school or AP credits. So, in order to take higher level classes, I had to test into them. This is stupendously annoying because, first off, I have to review for these tests because I haven't taken some of the corresponding courses like biology in years. And secondly, it meant that the 12 AP credits I had from getting 12 fives, and no, I'm not lying, here's the proof, 8 of which I didn't even take the class for and just self-studied for the AP in the hopes that I'd get credit for them in college. Well, all of that time and money, which was around $1,200, was wasted. But what can you do? I'd sold my soul to the university by applying early decision, which illegally obliged me to attend the school if I got in, even if it wasn't my top choice. My college counselor had told me that I was a bit too brain dead to get into any of my dream schools, and, like the massive Kentucky Fried Chicken that I was, I listened to her and abandoned my hopes on the side of the freeway. Either way, I still had to prepare for these tests because there was no way I was going to sit through Calc 101 after taking 2 years worth of calculus in high school. The placement tests were administered right before the school year started, so I decided to spend my entire summer cooped up inside like some sort of gremlin, hunched over the computer, memorizing a college calculus textbook I'd pirated because I'm too broke to afford the $1,000 cost of buying a real one. And that wasn't pleasant. It probably saved me from contracting the virus, but I wouldn't say it was good for my health. Definitely not my mental health. Here's an example why. In multivariable calculus, you can have a domain D, which, for the purposes of this video, will simplify to be an arbitrary region in 3D space. Now, how many ways do you think you can describe this giant blob? 2? 3? Maybe 5? Well, it's a little higher than that. Allow me to list them for you. You can have a bounded domain, an unbounded domain, a closed domain, a non-closed domain, an open domain, a piecewise smooth domain, a simple domain, a horizontally simple domain, a vertically simple domain, a connected domain, a simply connected domain, an axially symmetric domain, a parameterized domain, and a map domain, more commonly referred to as the image of the domain, or just the image, or the image of the map, or the range of the map. That's 15 ways. People often joke that lawyers are some of the most anal people in the world because they manage to turn a sentence into a paragraph, but I feel like mathematicians will take that same sentence and turn it into a 12-volume historical compendium that manages to use every single word in the Merriam-Webster English Dictionary. But strangely enough, when it comes to variables, mathematicians are stumped. Take lowercase n, for example. It's the index for a sequence or series, it's the unit normal vector for a single variable function, it's the generic normal vector for a multivariable function, it's the winding number, and it's one of the most commonly used generic variables. Uppercase T is most commonly the unit tangent vector for a single variable function, and the period. With a vector subscript, it becomes a generic tangent vector in the direction of said vector. With an n subscript, it's the nth Taylor polynomial. Capital Phi is one of the angles in spherical coordinates, the upper surface of a vertically simple solid region, and the x-component function of a map. Capital Phi with some bars on top is a map. How? Literally, how do mathematicians manage to make things this convoluted? If you manage to describe a blob in space in 15 different ways, why can one letter represent 5 different things? I know you're limited to the Latin and Greek alphabets, but can you at least put a squiggle or something over the line to symbolize that was different? Or maybe, just maybe, you could open your squinted eyes that you have from solving equations in your darkened basement all day to avoid the tax collectors coming after you because math won't pay your bills, and realize that there are more than 2 alphabets in this world. Cyrillic, Slovak, and runic scripts all exist. Hell, the entirety of Mandarin Chinese is literally just different symbols. How in the name of the eternal Soviet Premier Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin did you manage to mess this up? And as if slogging through nearly 2,000 pages of inconsistent, incoherent, symbolic jumble that's more confusing than the Minecraft enchanting language wasn't enough, there was the issue of actually learning the material after I'd read it. Because there's a lot of formulas and theorems to memorize, I decided to use Quizlet. The last time I'd used it was in junior year to memorize Spanish vocab, and back then, it was okay. I think I actually learned more new words from calculus and Spanish, but that's a small gripe compared to the big problem I have with Quizlet. Because Quizlet, and I didn't think this was possible, is having a midlife crisis. Like the average office worker who turns 40 and suddenly realizes that their only contribution to society is consuming natural resources and making some numbers in a database go up because they're just cogs in a giant corporate machine, Quizlet has come to realize that its sole purpose in life is to be an online flashcard thingy. As the middle-aged man suddenly buys a convertible sports car, gets hair implants, and picks up as many new hobbies as possible, Quizlet's tried to do the same thing. They've added all sorts of quizzes, games, and network integration so you can refer people to Quizlet like it's your favorite high school drug dealer hiding behind the bleachers. And just like the middle-aged man, they failed miserably at every single new thing they've done. They didn't realize that anyone beyond the age of 12 doesn't use flashcards to memorize words for a spelling test. So why have a spelling quiz? They didn't realize that nobody in their right mind wants an AI-driven learning progress tracker that first off doesn't even work and secondly feels like it's some sort of useless biometric instrument on your Fitbit that measures the saltiness of the sweat you generate as a function of the amount of green you see in a day. And to top it all off, just like the middle-aged man losing his office job after he's become irrelevant after spending all his time on his useless hobbies, Quizlet's managed to screw up the only thing they were good at: making flashcards. The display doesn't work because for some reason the default window is small enough that the arrow keys move the whole card side to side instead of changing cards. The option for which side is up doesn't make any sense because some idiot decided to put answer with instead of just shown side or something simple like that. Nobody wants to listen to that god-awful bootleg Google Translate robot thing read you your terms because it mispronounces any word more complicated than something you'd find in a Wow Wow Wubsy episode. And then there's the text editor for the cards that has less features than the one they used in the 8-bit Apple II computer from 1977. You can type uppercase, lowercase, and some Greek characters. That's it. If you want anything more, you have to pay $35.88 a year. Except that only gets you offline access and no ads, the latter of which you can get around with pretty much any good ad blocker. So in reality, you need to pay $47.88 a year to get bold, italicization, underlining, and adding pictures. Also known as stuff that Word has had for the last 37 years. Sure, there's other things, but half of them are redundant filler, and the other half are as worthless as trying to bail a sinking ocean liner with a teaspoon. Unlike Word, however, there's no support for case-sensitive Greek letters, no Unicode, no superscripts, no subscripts, no equations, and no different fonts. In other words, nothing remotely worth that much of your money. Oh, and as if this couldn't be a more blatant cash grab by a company flailing like an epileptic in the hope that they'll somehow become relevant again, there's a third way you can waste your money on this piece of bloatware. Quizlet Premium, which lets you buy study guides that you could have found just by Googling them. The methamphetamine-abusing inbred man-child behind this identity crisis having sellout is this Lego minifigure of a man who's so bland that nobody would recognize him if he was on a missing persons poster. Matthew Goldsbach. He's the human equivalent of a sock photo, a toast sandwich, or a beige paint job. He has no redeeming, hell, he has no discernible features whatsoever besides a hairline that's running away from him faster than his wife. Words cannot describe how much I'd like to bean him over the head with a frozen pool noodle. But moving past that, moving past the inherent frustrations of calculus and the way I learned it, we arrive at test day. A day 4 months and countless torn hairs in the making. And how did it begin? With me realizing that in order to take the placement test, I had to fill out a Google form. 3 months ago. So I emailed the math department. They didn't respond. I called every single faculty member in the math department that taught undergraduates. None of them picked up. I emailed my academic advisor. She didn't respond. And I called just about everyone in the administration whose name I could pronounce until I got to the secretary of the assistant dean of students. She patched me through to the math department, who then opened up the test for me. Because it was now 5 in the afternoon and my concentration was starting to slip like a quadriplegic lemur on ice, I decided to just get the test done before I completely lost my mind and started ranting about the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. Long story short, I failed. 14 out of 68. 20.6%. But the way I managed to fail was spectacular. I got every single multivariable question correct on the multiple choice section, so all of the difficult stuff, and then managed to screw up easy stuff like series and sequences. And then came the free response questions. Somehow a good third of them were number theory questions, even though that wasn't on the test description. But regardless, I managed to solve almost all of them and scan them in. As I was about to upload them, however, I realized that being the massive brain-dead clot that I was, I'd scanned all of the questions as one PDF instead of separating them into separate ones like the quiz had asked. So I opened Adobe Acrobat to separate the PDF and, what do I find but a login screen? Apparently when I wasn't looking, my mom had logged into my Adobe account on her phone to scan some documents even though free apps like Cam Scanner exist, and she can get Adobe for free by counting it as a work expense. And that had logged me out. Keep in mind through all of this that I pay for Adobe out of my own pocket with YouTube money. So after being redirected a couple hundred times because I forgot my password, I finally managed to log in only for my computer to brick. And much like a brick, I was so tempted just to hurl it through my window and see what it'd do to the lawnmower people who hadn't shut up since 6 a.m. this morning. After spending 5 minutes trying to get it unfrozen, I figured there was nothing to do but to hard reboot it. Now, because this is my workstation and not my laptop, it's got a 1TB HDD for all you computer nerds out there, and that means it takes forever to boot up. This normally isn't a problem, but on this occasion with my time-sensitive test, it definitely was. By the time it booted up, I still had a good 5 minutes left to edit and submit everything, but that wasn't going to happen. Not if Discord, Spotify, my VPN, Word, sticky notes, Firefox, Opera, Razer Chroma, Razer Synapse, and the Adobe Creative Cloud had anything to say about it. With all these apps booting up on start, my computer fans were screaming almost as loud as I was. After shoving that stupid bear back in his tunnel, beating the nitro out of the Wumpus, and throwing Addison Rae's podcast in the trash where it belonged. Side note, I hate that girl. She has no likable features whatsoever besides being rich enough to afford enough plastic surgery and implants to turn her into a first silicon-based life form that still doesn't have a personality. After all of that, I got back to the quiz, but it was too late. I arrived just in time for that stupid Canvas notification that goes, "Oopsies! Time's up!" to pop up and stop me from submitting anything at all in my free response section. And then I got my result. 14 out of 68. Enough to get me into Calc 101 and possibly qualify me for some learning disability resources. Certainly enough to tell me that I'd wasted my whole summer. So yeah, I don't know. Check out my socials, like and sub if you want to or something. Proton Plays Roblox just handed me a full Gapplebee's menu in the sub war and I'm too exhausted. I don't care. See ya.